Okie dokie, we are ready for section 2.3, graphing equations of lines. Why do we do these? For modeling motion and for finding total costs and lots of other cool things like that. First of all, to get some definitions out of the way, what is a y-intercept? The y-intercept is where the line intersects the y-axis. Where the line intersects the y-axis. Next we have slope-intercept form. What does slope-intercept form look like? Y equals mx plus b, which we should be fairly familiar with from Algebra 1. Remember that m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Now if I'm in a graph y equals 1/2 x plus 1, the first thing I need to do is figure out what b is. b is the plus 1 at the end of the equation. Once I have b equals 1, I'm going to go along the y-axis because remember y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. So I'm going to go on the y-axis and I'm going to put a dot at positive 1. Once I've done that, then it's time to find the slope. The slope, remember, is the number in front of the x. That's called the coefficient of x. In this case, the slope is 1/2. And remember that slope is rise over run. So I'm going to go up 1 because the rise is positive, 1 is positive, and then I'm going to go to the right 2 because the 2 is also positive, and going to the right is a positive direction. And then I'm going to plot another point where that stops. Then I'll do another up 1 over 2, plot another point, and I always like to have at least 3 points because then I know that the line is going to be straight and I can kind of tell if I made a mistake somewhere in the middle there. So I'm going to put a straight line through there, and we need arrows on both ends of that line because this line does go on forever. Next up, we've got y equals negative 2/3 x minus 4. So again, we're going to start with this number on the end. That's the y-intercept. So b in this situation is negative 4. So now I'm going to go over to the y-axis and I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3. There's negative 4. So that's where my first dot should go. It's a nice pretty dot. Now I'm going to go over and I look at the coefficient of x. That's my slope. So in this problem, m is negative 2/3. So from the point that I plotted, okay, so I need to start at this point, I'm going to go down 2. I'm going to make the 2 negative, so I'm going to go down 2, and then I have to go to the right, positive 3. And plot my next point. And I'm going to make another one going down 2, right 3 again. Now if we go back to this original starting point, remember that when you have a negative fraction, either one of these numbers could be negative. So this could be positive 2 over negative 3 also. That's still going to give me negative 2/3. So if I would have used that, starting with this original point, since the 2 is positive, I would go up 2 because that's the rise, and then I'd go to the left 3 because that's the run. So I'd still have a point right there. And then again, remember, once we're finished with that, we need to draw our line. Hang on for 1 second. We've got to make sure we've got the right line here because remember, we've got to have arrows on both ends. Okay? So for this line, I'm going to draw that right through there with arrows on both ends. So now I have graphed y equals negative 2/3 x minus 4. Next up, find the slope-intercept form of the line. Basically what that means, remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. If I want to get it in that form, basically what I'm doing is I'm taking this equation and I'm going to get this y by itself. So the first step would be to go ahead and subtract the 3x. So I'm going to do that on both sides. These cancel out then, and that leaves me with negative 2y equals, and we're going to put the x first. So I'm going to go negative 3x. And the reason I did that is because I want it in this slope-intercept form. So we always put the coefficient of x first. And then we've got positive 6, so I need to put plus 6 at the end. Next up, we need to divide everything by negative 2 to get the y by itself. Then these guys factor out. That leaves me with y equals, and here when we're dividing, two negatives make a positive, so it's going to be positive 3/2 x, and here we've got a positive over a negative. That's a negative, so I'm going to go minus 6/2, which is 3. So it's going to be y equals 3/2 x minus 3. That is now in slope-intercept form. Another one. Again, if I want to get the y by itself, the first step would be to subtract 2x from both sides. Then these will cancel each other out. So we've got 5y, that's a y, equals negative 2x, remember to write that first, plus 10. And then the next part we're going to divide by 5. And when I do that, I divide everything by 5. These 5's factor out, and remember that was a y. So y equals, one negative leaves us with a negative 2/5 x. And then positive 10 over 5 is positive 2, so plus 2. And again, now we have rewritten that in slope-intercept form. So now we need to talk about horizontal lines. Horizontal lines are when we have a graph of y equals c, where c is just any real number. That's going to be a horizontal line through the point 0, c. And we also need to talk about vertical lines. That's when you have a graph of x equals any real number, which is the vertical line going through the point c0. So to start out with, let's say I have y equals negative 2. I know that that's going to be a horizontal line because it's a y equals. So now first I want to find where y is negative 2. So along the y-axis, I'm just going to start by plotting a point at negative 2. And then because I know that it's a horizontal line, I'm going to put a horizontal line through that point. Now a good way to check and make sure that this is right, because sometimes people get confused on whether it should be horizontal or vertical. A nice thing about these is you could just check any point on the line. If I put a point there, that's the point 3, negative 2. Y is negative 2. If I go out to this point, that is the point 10, negative 2. So no matter where I put a point on this line, y should always be negative 2. What about x equals? If I have x equals 3, that's going to be, first I'm going to start on the x-axis. I'm going to plot a point at 3. Once I've done that, now I know that this is going to be a vertical line, so I'm going to draw a vertical line through that point. And again, if you're not sure if it should be vertical or horizontal, just go ahead and check some points. X should always be 3. That point that I just plotted is 3, 3. X is 3. And that concludes section 2.3.